Welcome to Show Me Sports Legacies. I'm your host, Jeff Crowley, and I'm here today with co-host Chris Ockenfels. We're talking about the running career of one Mark Curp, born in Chillicothe, Missouri, raised in Polo, Missouri, who went on to be a 9-time All-American at Central Missouri State University, went on to a professional career and competing all over the United States, including 1987, 1988, where Runner's World named him the Road Racer of the Year. Pretty big deal. Broke a world record in 1985 at the Philadelphia race, where he ran 13.1 miles, half marathon in 1 hour and 55 seconds, setting a world record he held for over 5 years, and the American record stood for 21 years after that accomplishment. It's pretty amazing coming from Polo, Missouri.
Yeah, one of our themes this year has been what can happen coming from small towns, especially small towns that we're familiar with in Northwest Missouri, and to set a world record, knowing that that's the fastest it's ever been run from anyone on the planet, is quite an accomplishment. Big things can happen coming from small places. And also one of the themes is competition that comes with sports, and a lot of times you are driven by the competition of the competitor across from you. But in running, it's a little different. Running, sometimes your biggest competition is yourself, and you're always striving to beat yourself. That's why the PR is so important, and you'll hear this in the interview about the PR, the personal record. Not did I beat my opponents, but did I beat my PR? Did I do better today than I did yesterday? One of the great quotes from our podcast has been Carl Carpenter mentioning that, at the end of the day, are you a little better today than you were yesterday? That theme. And that really comes into play with running, because you're always battling that. Can I be better this week than I was last week? Can I be better this year than I was last year? And to do that, you have to have self-dedication, self-motivation, self-discipline. You have to get up in the morning when that alarm goes off at 4:30 and run just by yourself. Mark, one of the great athletes to come from North Missouri, is a great example of what it takes.
And he had a long running career. He did it for almost 20 years, and that landed him in the Distance Running Hall of Fame. It landed him in the inaugural class, University of Central Missouri Sports Hall of Fame. It landed him in the Missouri Sports Hall of Fame. He had a big impact in the Kansas City area, where he held all the records at Hospital Hill. And it not only played itself out within races, that persistence and that pushing through, it was that he kept pushing on year after year after year.
Longevity and, again, the self-sacrifice to run and have a running career for 20 years is amazing.
We're going to have an interview with Mark Curp from Polo, Missouri, and my friend Brent Martin, who is a longtime newscaster and well-known in this area. Got together with a couple of friends and just kind of went through his entire career, beginning in the small town of Polo, Missouri. Welcome today to Show Me Sports Legacies. We have a special guest and another special guest who's going to help us get that story out. Got a couple of my old friends here. I won't say how old, but it's been a long time. Known each other for decades. First of all, from the small town of Polo, Missouri, came Missouri's greatest distance runner of all time. Establishing a reputation in high school, Mark stacked up 9 All-American honors, including 2 Division I All-American honors, in his time at Central Missouri State University in cross country and in track, specializing in 10,000 meters. After discovering he could make a living as a professional in the early 1980s, he went on to glory with a world record in the half marathon in 1985 in Philadelphia. He held that world record for over 5 years, then retained the American record for over 21 years. Known for his consistent high-level performances, Mark was named the top road racer in 1987 and 1988 by Runner's World. He continued running throughout the 80s and 90s competitively and was an icon in the Kansas City running community and beyond. Here to help me explore these stories with Mark that he can share about his life running on the road is his college roommate and lifelong friend, Brent Martin, also a lifelong friend of mine. Brent is currently news director at KFEQ Eagle Radio in St. Joseph. His award-winning career in radio included a long stint as managing editor of Missouri Net and Nebraska Radio Network before returning near his hometown in Cowgill, Missouri, and his family. My disclaimer is that I know both of these fellows for decades. I promise I will only disclose relevant information about that on a need-to-know basis, and I look forward to learning a great deal more in the next hour.
Need-to-know basis.
So let's start with some scene setting, guys. Both of you grew up in north central Missouri in rural communities and on farms. Mark, what can you tell me about your early memories of life in Polo, Missouri?
Well, it was being on a farm, and it was not a high-tech farm. Of course, there wasn't much high-tech back at that point in time, but it was challenging, hard. I didn't know at the time, really didn't know how hard it was, but we raised pigs and cows, and then raised row crop too, mostly soybeans, corn, and milo or grain sorghum. I grew up doing chores in the morning before school.
Yeah.
And I'd go to school, and then practice sports, and then come home and do chores again at night, and then rinse and repeat and do it again the next day.
Something that was interesting what you said about you didn't realize. I mean, it was just what we did.
Yeah.
It wasn't high tech. You didn't really realize that we worked very hard.
Yeah.
It's what everybody did.
Yeah. To make it faster, when I would carry either grain or, usually it was grain, I'd get 4 5-gallon buckets, put grain in each one, and I'd carry 2 on each side so I didn't have to make 2 trips. So
smart.
See, that's what started it right there.
That's right.
That's how Mark Curp became who he was. Grain buckets.
that's how my arms got so long and I didn't grow very tall early on.
We heard that same story from Sierra Michaelis, who was one of the all-time leading scorers in Missouri high school basketball and played at Missouri University, carrying buckets around on the farm. It was the only weightlifting she ever got near. So that kind of sets the scene. And in sports, when you were young, before you were in real organized sports, what were the things that appealed to you?
I didn't play any sports at all until 7th grade, and I didn't really watch much on TV. But I guess 7th grade is where my active sports and organized sports began. Played football 7th grade and in the fall, basketball in the winter, and track in the spring. And the 7th grade, at that time, the longest you could run in a race was a quarter mile.
Yeah.
And then 8th grade, it was a half mile. And then freshman year, I got to jump up to the 2 mile. That's where it started track-wise, and I was not very big. And so I did get to play football and basketball, but it was mostly on the bench and watching. I did get to start one game in high school football and scored my one and only touchdown on a reverse, 70-yard reverse. So, against Norburn. Homecoming, that was the only touchdown.
Did your high school require that you do track if you were going to be in any other?
I wasn't aware of it if they did require it. They never talked about it. And the thing was that the majority of the boys, because there weren't that many in Polo, the majority of boys played all 3 sports. There were some that only played.
It's kind of almost all hands on deck.
Yeah.
I mean, because there's not enough.
You pretty much had to.
In these little, I don't know if people realize how small these high schools were, because Polo was smaller than Bramer. I think at that time, Central River Conference was the conference with the smallest schools that still played 11-man football.
11-man, yeah.
They don't anymore.
Right.
And Norburn was very good, Oric was good, and Hardin was good.
Yeah. Polo had, my graduating class was a record at the time, and probably still is a record, and we had 42.
So it's small. And so I'm going to go out on a limb because, Mark, you and I are within a week of each other, the same age. And I'm going to step out on a limb and I'm going to talk about facilities and equipment. Okay, we've talked about how few people there were, and there wasn't much. I remember having to borrow spikes, and I didn't know how to run in spikes. The shorts didn't fit. They were kind of balloon-like, and that was before MC hammers, so this wasn't a cool kind of balloon-like.
Right.
And what passed for sweats in those days had absolutely no R value. I mean, there was just no...
It's cotton.
It was just cotton, and it was thin.
Yep.
And it was probably faded, whatever your school color was. Red turned to pink in Lawson.
Yeah.
That got handed down to the junior high kids. And then tracks, if anyone had one.
Didn't have a track at Polo?
It was called the block around the old high school.
Okay.
We just run a block, and it was uphill on one side and downhill on the other. So...
In Lawson, when I ran as a freshman, we ran on the sidewalk.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, that was really good for shin splints and things like that.
Bramer actually had a track around the football.
You did?
Yeah, football field.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
look
right.
at you.
Did. Yeah,
because you ran there.
Yeah.
You
Cinder track. Yep.
Okay. And I remember we ran at Carrollton when we were kids, and that was like a chat track or something. And Excelsior had some kind of a chat track. I mean, it was just...
Well, even William Jewell had cinder. My junior year, that's where state was at William Jewell. And it was muddy. There was like 2 or 3 inches of rain on it. It was a mess. But anyway.
Later in your career, obviously, and when you'd be interviewed about big races, you'd always talk a little bit about weather and humidity and wind and direction and this and that and the other. Mud. That's something entirely differently at a state track meet.
That was horrible. I mean, I was 5'2" and 105 pounds at the time. 2 stronger runners, strength-wise, finished ahead of me my junior year. I'd attribute a lot of that to the mud. I just got tired and worn down.
Okay. Then your senior year?
Senior year, I was at CMSU at the time, and I won the 2 mile and set a state record at the time. And the boy that had beat me the year before first, he ended up being second or third my senior year.
I remember by the time you got to your senior year, people knew about you, and they knew about you before the track meet would begin, your junior and senior year. and you came to Lawson, and I had a friend who was a decent runner, and you just left him just immediately and pretty much lapped the field in that 2-mile run. It was fun to watch because it was just so different from what we were accustomed to. So a lot of times you probably found yourself way out ahead of the pack, and you were basically running against yourself.
Yep, in high school especially.
What did you start out running? I mean, did you start with?
In high school?
Yeah, the 2-mile, or was it?
Well, my first experience was as a freshman. We had a PE class as a freshman, and coach had everybody in PE, and it was freshmen through seniors, go out and see how far they could run in 12 minutes. And around that block, around the old high school gym that's no longer there, I lapped everybody in the field, and the seniors were cutting across corners trying to stay with me. And I did, 2 miles in that 12 minutes. So then they slotted me into the conference track meet as a freshman.
So right away it was long distance.
Yeah. I never wasn't that successful at 800 or 880 at the time, or the 440. I could go out and just run. I wasn't real fast, but I could keep a good pace even at that time.
Okay, so you had a good day on the CMSU track. Were you already being recruited by CMSU at that time, or was that part of the recruitment? They saw you that day? And
I would imagine Coach Pilkington was thinking about it at that time. And actually, I can't remember if I had the visit I went to William Jewell, I went to Northwest Missouri State University, and I went to CMSU. And so there was some recruitment, and as it ended up, William Jewell did offer something at the time. I don't remember what it was, but when you compared the cost of going to William Jewell versus the cost of going to CMSU, and I got a whopping $100 scholarship to go to CMSU.
Wow.
For the whole year, not per semester or trimester at the time. But then it only cost $1,250 for room, board, books, and tuition for the whole year. So $100 was pretty good.
A lot of us ended up at CMSU for monetary reasons because you didn't have to buy books.
Yeah, that's right.
I remember I'd go to the union and I'd take a $20 check and I'd cash it, and I'd live on that for sometimes 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Oh,
definitely.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We never had money.
No.
None in school.
There was no money.
But we didn't really think about
It
it.
got a little better, though, for you. You earned the scholarship, though, after a while.
Second year, basically what Coach Pilkington did at the time is looked at all the resources that you had, and then he would try to make up the difference, so I didn't have any out of pocket. And so I always had other scholarships and grant throughout school, and so he would help out and make up the difference there. That way he could spread the other scholarships around to other athletes.
And that was Coach Jim Pilkington,
correct.
Who was the longtime
head coach.
Head coach, cross country, track, and the whole.
What kind of coaching were you getting at that point? I mean, was that the first time you got technical kind of coaching?
Yeah, I would guess so. And really the coaching came more from Bob Busby. Kind of had some influence in there around the time that I was there. But then other runners from past years, Charlie Gray came back, Cliff Young, and some others came back and helped with the coaching. Coach Pilkington he was a background of football player and sprinter. And so he really didn't have a ton of background from coaching distance running. And so he relied on pulling in other athletes and Bob Busby for kind of setting the standard for what training was. And it carried on just year after year.
And Bob became close friend of yours.
Yeah. He just lives across town here.
And you ran together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we would, of course, years later than what we were talking about here, there would be a group of us because there were quite a few runners that graduated from Central and Bob as a coach, and all lived here in Lee Summit. And so on weekends, we'd have anywhere from 4 to 8, 9, 10 of us that would gather together a lot of times on weekends and run together.
One of the things I remember, and you've talked about this in some interviews, is the discipline and the focus that you had. So you pretty much, there were two things you did. You did your academics and you ran.
Yeah, in college, yeah. Absolutely. That was it. I think I had all the way through college, maybe 3 or 4 dates. So maybe. I'm not sure, but
we
maybe.
would try to get him to do different. It didn't work.
I remember.
Mark was always. He was.
I studied and I ran.
Well, we studied. Yeah,
we studied together.
Yeah, we studied together. We had economics together. We
aced it.
But no, Mark was always very, very diligent, and he was just booked. We kind of were anyway. When we were at Central, all of us were studious. All of us wanted to do well academically, and we worked very hard on that. I can remember more than once him coming back. He had the cheesy little mustache that he had back then, and it was all frozen. It had ice on it because he'd been
I was
running.
impressed by that mustache. I could never grow a mustache.
But what was your pattern?
Normally in the mornings, we would do 4 or 5 miles in the morning, and then come back in the afternoon anywhere from 8 to 12.
That's what I remember. There were a couple times he had me get out there with him, and he'd slow way down. The only time that bothered me is one time we were out running.
You were running, or you were in a vehicle?
No, I was running. I was running with him. I could actually run then because I was young, but I was running with him, and we're running, and he's, having to be really slow for me. The only thing that bothered me is when he turned around and he started running backwards. I said, "Don't do that. That's embarrassing."
And talking to him.
That's him. He was running backwards and talking to me. And I'm like, "Oh, for crying out loud. I know you're a great runner, but don't do that." It's just, okay. I won't.
I remember occasionally I would come over and entice Brent to go to Wendy's because we'd had a particularly atrocious meal over in South Ellis. And
you didn't have very good meals over there.
Yeah, they weren't that good.
Hudson wasn't bad.
Yeah, it wasn't.
But we would always ask you to go, and you were always preparing already for a 5 a.m. run or something, So very much more disciplined than us. We were all about that single burger.
Whatever is cheap.
And I have to give you credit. I mean, you got through school. You survived your roommate. Let's be honest. I mean, he was kind of a hot mess back then. I mean, he turned into a pretty fabulous human being. But,
wow.
Hey, we're not supposed to talk about these things.
Okay. I won't get into specifics.
Now I'm wondering why I decided to do this.
I am teasing because I was every bit the hot mess. We were looking for distractions, and we did our academics, but if we had free time, we didn't necessarily apply it to something else like that.
He was a little more disciplined. Well, you had to be, though.
Oh, yeah.
You had to be because you did not have to do your academics and to do your running. You had to be very disciplined.
Mm-hmm. If you wanted to do well.
Yeah. Right. I mean, there just wasn't any time.
And growing up on a farm, you're used to hard work. And so when I went to college, it was like a breeze. I mean, I didn't have to get up in the morning to go do chores. I went out for a run, but it took 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And then go back again in the afternoon. And then it was just study. And it was, to me, in my mind, it was easy compared to the stress of doing stuff on the farm.
One of the things I wanted Mark to talk about some is describe when you got there, you were very successful, 1A, Missouri, but you came in and there were these runners from the city, from other places, and you no longer were the top runner.
I was the last. There were 12, 14 freshmen, and then that many more upperclassmen when I got down there. And starting out those first few weeks, I was the last runner of everybody. And it hurt. It hurt so bad because I came into it not running a whole lot in high school. Well, leading up to going down to CMSU, the longest run I'd ever run was 5, maybe 6 miles. That was the longest one. And just going out and running,
as you're training.
As I'm training, yeah. And it was just, I didn't think much about changing the pace. It was just, I went out and ran from point A to point B. And then I went down to cross-country camp my freshman year, having not run further than 5 miles. And that first day, we did 10 miles and 5 miles. We did 15 miles. And I remember through camp, after a couple of days, I could hardly walk down steps. It hurt so bad. And so I made sure after that, every summer following that I never went into camp with low mileage.
What clicked, though? What motivated you on that? Because I think some people could have been discouraged by that.
I think part of it is, whatever sport you play, do you love the sport? I enjoyed the process of running and then getting to run with people. In high school, there was no one to run with, especially my senior year. I was on my own. There was no one around. There were three guys on a track team my senior year. Myself, a distance runner. We had a hurdler, and we had throws. That was it. And so I ran on my own. Sometimes I would, during PE was the last hour of class, and so periodically I would give my clothes to my sisters, and I would change into my stuff, and I would, during PE, I'd run home. I'd run home and do chores, and I'd have chores done before they got home on the bus. Now, today, that would not happen. Yeah. Back then, that was okay. It was the last hour of school, and I was just going out and running. I'd run 5 miles home from school.
But you didn't even know about that you needed to stretch out and needed to increase your running for practice.
No, just went out and had fun.
You never had this kind of competition.
No. And so I think having a competitive spirit in me, I wanted to get better, and I'd done well in high school, and so I didn't even think about not being able to improve. I didn't think about it. There were guys in front of me, and I kept running until I passed some of those. By the end of cross-country season, I was basically tied with John Case for the top 2 freshmen out of those 14 freshmen. And so we both of us got to go to nationals as alternates and then watch the upperclassmen. And unfortunately, they didn't run well. Several of them didn't. I'm thinking, oh, man, I would like to have run that. And so in that period of time between starting my freshman year in college till starting my sophomore year in college, I grew 6.5 inches and gained 30 pounds. And so I gained a lot of strength and just matured and continued running. And so I went from being the last person on the team starting my freshman year to I was the first person on the team starting my sophomore year. And then that continued throughout the rest of my college career.
Was it any different when you got to participate in the Division I running? Did it feel different to you?
Oh, absolutely. My junior and senior year, well, first of all, you had to go Division II national at the time. It's not an option now because they're all the same weekend. But back then, Division II Nationals was 1 week, and then Division I Nationals was the following week. And if you had a qualifying time and placed in the top 3 at Division II, you could go on to Division I. So I got to do that my junior and senior year. My junior year, I took 9th at Division I and was the 6th American. And you had to be top 6 Americans to be All-American Division I. And then my senior year, I was 10th and was still the top 6 American at Division I Nationals. So yeah, the competition was a lot higher, but I still was able to run with them, but there were obviously more that were ahead of me. But it was fun. I enjoyed that and being able to improve along the way. Fortunately, all through my, sophomore, junior, and senior years at Nationals, my best races of the year were at Nationals. Trained hard through the season, and then I would rest more that last week, and I really didn't rest for the rest of the season. And I kind of kept that most of my career in running, that I trained through most of my races, and unless I was going to run a marathon.
What path did you see after you graduated, finished up your eligibility? What did you envision that you would continue running because you were good at it?
I had no idea at the time. And I would have gone to work, if I hadn't got an NCAA postgraduate scholarship to continue work on my master's, I'm quite confident I would stop running, and I would have gone to work for Federal Land Bank. That was kind of the path I was going with Ag Econ undergrad. But I got the postgraduate scholarship, allowed me to continue running, and I continued improving. And in the 4th trimester of my master's, I got a grad assistantship. So I was able to cover all my college, the master's program on the scholarship the first year, and then the last trimester, I had a grad assistant with the track team. I guess it was cross country at that point. But it was at that point that my times improved enough, and then I got the opportunity to run at a national track meet down in Knoxville, Tennessee, and place 5th, and I didn't have spikes on, 10,000 on the track. I was just wearing racing flats. And then that's when a New Balance rep came up to me, spoke to me, and of course he saw that everybody else in the field had spikes on, and I didn't. Asked me if I'd like some shoes and clothing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't mind that.
And so then I went and ran Diet Pepsi Championship in New York City.
That was the big one, wasn't it? That got you.
I had the New Balance, because I had at the track championship, I got the shoes and a jersey. I think it was a gray jersey at the time. And so I went to New York City, qualified in a race here in Kansas City, Kansas, and then went out to New York City, and I took 2nd in the race. I was a few seconds behind Rod Dixon, who was an Olympian, and I was 2 or 3 seconds ahead of Bill Rogers, an Olympian. And of course, nobody knew who I was. And I had a big PR out of it, and I won some prize money. And that
was kind of new to you. Well, you didn't really know that was
going out to the race. I had no idea there was prize money. In fact, I didn't know there was prize money until the night before at the dinner. And then they said they said something about prize money. And I'm trying to remember now. I think for 2nd place, I think I got $2,000 or $3,000, something like that. And then I started thinking, wheels start turning. New Balance had approached me, no contract at the point, and it's like, maybe you can make some money at this. And I wasn't aware of the under the table money that was happening, under the table appearance money that had been happening for a few years prior to that, and that was before it was a professional sport. That fall, the New Balance offered me a contract the following January. So that was 1984.
So it was under the table because you couldn't, you were quote unquote amateur.
Right.
And you couldn't
make money. Or make you
so
ineligible for, I guess, any races, and certainly ineligible for the Olympics. Couldn't do any of that if you were making money from running. Couldn't, because there weren't any professional sports, even though other countries, that's their job, was to compete for their countries professionally, even though it wasn't professionally, but they did it.
I remember in 83, I went over to see my sister who was in Scotland, and I think it was at Helsinki, it was the World Championships that year. And that was kind of the first blow up where the Carl Lewises of the world, the Edwin Moses of the world, and the Mary Deckers of the world, all those athletes kind of came up at that same time. And so it became a sport that was attracting eyeballs and money. And they were constantly talking about how the Europeans were so far ahead of them. And a lot of those athletes would run just in Europe to make money.
Yeah, exactly.
So you kind of came up at a really good time.
Yeah, and initially had these TAC trusts, the Athletics Congress Trust Funds. And so any appearance, any prize money that you got from races had to be deposited into the trust fund, and then you could withdraw it. You'd send in a request for expenses and get money out of it. And that lasted 3 or 4 years maybe. And then professionalism was fine, and the TAC trust were eliminated. And then you could take appearance money and prize money.
So in 83, you really come on the scene. 84 is right around the corner. The Olympics are in L.A. What were you thinking at that time?
Well, I thought I had a real shot at it. My 10K time, and this was before I ran the marathon, 10K time kept dropping. Really, to be on the world stage and be able to compete at the Olympics, you need to break 28 minutes. And I ended up running 28:01. But at the trials, I qualified for the trials, went to the trials and had a preliminary and a final. So I qualified in the prelim and ran 28:20 or something like that. Not my fastest. I'd run 28:01 prior to that year I had. And then get into the final. And there's a group of us together. I'm knowing, you got your Paul Cummings and Craig Virgin, some of them that obviously had a lot more leg speed than me, Bruce Bickford and several others, Gary Bjorklund and several that were in there. And so it comes down to the last mile, and there are 6 or 7 of us together. And so I start pushing the pace because I was like, I'm not going to stay with these guys. And I pushed the pace, and the last mile was the fastest of the 6. And I just wasn't able, I broke some of them, but it came down to 5 of us there. I think there were, with a mile to go, I think there were 7 of us there. So I broke it down to 5. And so I'm leading. And then, of course, Paul Cummings, who was a friend of mine, was just off my shoulder. So I run my last lap as hard as I can. I do a 62-second last lap, but he runs a 56. And so he wins, and I took 5th. And I was 3 seconds out of 3rd place. Obviously, top 3 go. So I was second alternate. And, just across the room here on the other side. I was that far behind 3rd place.
You said you could almost touch 3rd place. You guys were that packed.
Yeah, 3rd place was it was 3 seconds.
It was just all packed with you guys, all 5.
Yeah, and it stretched out, and I ended just on the back end of that group.
What did you learn from that? I remember disappointment.
Yeah,
you want to make the Olympics, but what did you learn? I mean, not just in running.
Well, I think part of it is especially growing up on a farm, you learn that not everything goes right. You deal with lots of disappointments, heartaches, failures on the farm, but you never quit. And part of that, too, is that my goal in going and running is I always wanted to glorify the Lord in whatever I did. Didn't matter what it was. And sure, it was a disappointment. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't disappointed, because my dream in high school and college was to make the Olympic team, be an All-American, which I'd done, and then make the Olympic team. And I got really close. I mean, it's almost reach it. But part of it was like, I ran well. I ran 28:06 in the final after running the prelim 2 days before. And so I was 5 seconds off of my best time, which I would say of the others running that were ahead of me, none of them were within 5 seconds of their PR. They all had faster times than myself. I was happy that I ran well and disappointed at the same time, but I knew that there was more to do and to keep on going. And so I was like, you don't give up, and you get right back in and keep going. As it turned out, I ended up running much faster as a whole in August when the Olympics were at, but I was running races back here in the States. And 2 is that I wanted to keep on improving, and I enjoyed the sport. And at that point, I'd started making some money at the sport. And so
you were still a new name. You were probably not expected to be in the top 5 at that point in 84 by time.
Right. I would be in the top 8 to 10.
Okay.
But so I don't think anybody expected me to be leading the race with a mile to go. Yeah. And pushing the pace.
So that you held up had to give you a lot of confidence that you held up against that quality competition.
One real problem that you ran into, though, with the Olympics is they didn't have your run.
Right.
The 10,000 and the marathon are not your run. Right. I mean, you're good at them, but the half marathon.
Yeah, anywhere from 15K to 25K was really my sweet spot.
Yeah.
But they didn't have that in the Olympics.
No, and still don't.
Yeah, which blows my mind that you go from 10,000 to marathon.
Yeah.
Because 10,000 is 6.2 miles.
Right.
Marathon's 26.
0.2.
26.2.
So
there's a gap in there that we could fill.
Yeah, the half would be great. Now they've had, since I was running, now they have world championships in the half marathon. They didn't have that at the time.
That would have been fun.
Oh, yeah.
That would have been.
I did get to go to one in Britain as a coach. So,
Oh, really?
yeah, that was fun.
Now, 85, you took that knowledge, you took that success, and you kind of exploded in 85.
Mm-hmm.
And one of your first big wins was at the Bix 7.
Yeah.
And it's fitting that we're talking on the weekend that the Bix is being run.
Oh, yeah.
It is the 51st running of that race, and it is the 40th anniversary of you winning that race.
Wow.
He's done his homework.
He has. He didn't make me, I didn't have to think.
Didn't have to do the math.
No.
You surprised Mark. Really?
40 years. Wow.
40 years ago, you won a big race,
Mm-hmm.
and that thing is huge. Thousands of runners.
Yes, it is.
Talk about that event. You had gotten close in previous years and broke through in 85.
Yeah. 85 was, I think, the compilation of the training over a period of 8 years, really going back into college. And then getting to Bix, and it's a hilly course, and I'm more of a strength runner, and so that helped me. My speed improved some over the course of that time, and then I was able to pull ahead at the end and win that race. And so I think I won a couple of Bixes, but that would have been the first.
One in 88 was the other one.
Was that what were some of your favorite races?
Well, obviously Bix would be Bix 7, Bettendorf, Quad Cities area. A couple different races in West Virginia. Used to be called the Elby's 20K, Wheeling, West Virginia. That was a good one. Parkersburg, West Virginia. Columbus, enjoyed that race. Columbus, Ohio. Then if you go west and north, up in Seattle Seafair, Portland, Oregon, those were a couple, just beautiful country there, races that I enjoyed. Wintertime, I enjoyed going to Florida. So Orlando, Jacksonville, Miami, I ran races there several
I
years.
never thought about the beauty of the race.
Mm-hmm.
Some are more beautiful than others when you're running. I mean, I think we think competition. You're just there not enjoying the beauty of the run itself.
Crowds and the energy that the crowds bring would help you at times, or did you ever notice that?
I guess when you compared it to some races where you get out in the middle and there was no crowds at all, then the energy when you were in the crowds was definitely more. One specific would be San Francisco Beta Breakers race, and they would have over 100,000 runners. So the first time I ran there, a friend of mine, Charlie Gray, had told me that when he had run it before that, they'd have trouble with runners just jumping in from the side. You'd start out in front, and then it'd be thousands of runners just jump in front of you. You couldn't run. And so by the time I ran it, they had a snow fence that was blocks and blocks out from the start. That was pretty incredible because I finished the race. It was 7-point-something miles, 8K. I can't remember the exact distance of it. But anyway, you'd run from the bay. You'd go up those stair-step hills, climb up one of those, and then go through the park, Golden Gate Park, come out to the beach, take a left, and then finish along the beach. And then you'd go back into the Golden Gate Park for the awards. And I remember finishing the race and then walking away, going into the park, and then doing a cool down inside the park along the road that we'd come out on. And so I had finished this 4 to 6 lane road going through the park. As far as you could see from either direction, there were runners all the way across, into the side. And so we finished, and the last people hadn't even crossed the starting line. That's how many people. So to give you perspective, that's the biggest race I've run in. And then a race in Spokane, Washington was another one, Lilac Blooms Day. They would have 40 to 50,000 runners.
What were some of the more odd or eccentric races? I mean, you ran in caves. You ran at midnight in Ames, Iowa.
Yeah.
Talk about those.
The caves was interesting. Being in the wintertime. Yeah. So you go inside there and it's pretty even temperature. Although back in the back, there would be areas that would be pretty hot and humid. The most challenging part of running the caves, it was all the sharp turns. And the lighting isn't as good. But that's unique. There's not a lot of those in the country. And then the Midnight Madness run, there are a few nighttime races. That one was hard because it was all in concrete. And when you're running in the dark, your feet don't see the surface as well. And so my legs were really tired after that one every time I ran it.
And you had a race up in Lincoln, I think, that you and Charlie ran, and you crossed the finish line together.
Yeah.
That's kind of an unusual
Lincoln
thing.
10-miler.
Has to be a pretty good friend when you're running.
Oh, yeah.
With them to
well, we did that
decide
one.
on that.
And then the St. Pat's race here in Kansas City, one time we came across the finish line holding hands together. But we trained. He lived close. We were just a few blocks away a lot of the time while I was training professionally. And so we would meet up 2 to 3 times a week and run together. So that definitely helped me where I didn't have to run by myself all the time.
So in 85, you break through and win this Big 7 race. A couple months later, you find yourself entered in a race in Philadelphia. So this is the biggest race of your career, ultimately, how it turned out. The result of it, at least, was. And what did you think going into that? How were you feeling in training?
Yeah, I trained through it, and I had pretty high mileage leading up to it. And
when you say train through it, that means you're training the entire. You're not taking time.
I didn't taper off
before.
Yeah, I think the week of that race, I'd have to go back and look for sure, but I had close to 90 miles that week, and I usually averaged between 80 and 90 miles a week training. For a marathon, I would taper off that week before, and I might run 40 miles that week. So
taper off and run 40.
So I didn't really taper off for it, and I felt just a little bit sluggish in the middle of the week, and I remember I was in Polo on that time, went out and did a workout, and I was a little frustrated because I felt a little stale, and I just hit a hard workout on, I think it was Wednesday before the race on Saturday. And I felt better after that. Went to the race and flew out there, went for an easy run the night before, and then got up, and I felt okay. I started out in a lot of runners, a lot of good runners, and I was in a pack of, there had to have been 12 of us running beyond 5 miles. And so,
let's set this. This was a half marathon, a distance run, but it was
13.1 miles.
13.1 miles.
And so I get to the 5 mile point, and I'm at the back of this group of runners and not feeling great. Get to almost to the halfway point, and it's like, it kind of got to that point where you either slack off or you push through. And I remember gritting down and pushing through. And so I went through 10K at that time. It was the fastest I'd gone through 10K of a half marathon, and it was under 29 minutes, 28:58 for 10K. At that point, it got easier. It's kind of, I broke through that point, and then it kept whittling down. There were less and less runners as we kind of turned the halfway point and came back, and came down to myself and Michael Musioki and Nick Rose, basically the last 3 miles, kind of jockeying back and forth amongst each other. There was an uphill, somewhat uphill. So we were averaging 438, 439 a mile for the race up to mile 11. And then we go up this hill.
That's incredible right there.
And we go up this
average 438 a mile.
And we go up this hill at during the 12th mile. And they were still right with me, but I pushed it hard up it, and I think did a 442, something like that. It was a little bit slower because it was uphill. And then with a mile to go, the three of us are still right there. And so with a mile out, I just let it all go and just took off. I broke away from Musioki first dropped off, and then Nick Rose dropped off. And then with a half mile to go, I hit it again. So then Nick dropped back a little bit. Musioki started coming back on me. And then with a quarter mile to go, I gave it all I had. And I kept expecting him to pass me at any point in time because I'd been in a number of races with Musioki before, and he had a little bit better leg speed than I did. And I expected him to come by me. He didn't. End up being, officially he was 2 seconds behind me. But I think if you had a clock on it, was probably a second and a half. But he was just like right behind me there, and I crossed the finish line first. And the interesting thing was that the media was on strike at that race. So there were no papers, no news. And so I crossed the finish line, and I knew I'd broke the world record. And Victor Saylor is a photographer that did a lot of the races, and he was riding in a motorcycle the whole race. And so from 10K on, he was telling us, you're on world record pace, you're on world record, which was motivating to keep going. And I, really from that 10K point on, I felt stronger the entire race. So where I struggled just a little bit the first half, and then I just felt more relaxed, and then was able to finish stronger in that race than any race in my career, and which was a good time to do it. But it was a great race. Ended up setting, as you mentioned, setting the world record. But I crossed the finish line, and because there were no reporters there, nobody to interview you, I ran straight on through. I didn't even stop. I ran straight on through, ran to the hotel room, and called home. And I just kept on going. And then, the award ceremony and all that was later.
Like Forrest Gump.
Yeah, and went home, and my brother Brian and I were talking about this not too long ago. It's kind of funny. He said, so how'd you do? I said, I did pretty good. Can I talk to Mom? And so I talked to my mom, and I told her I set the world record on it. And Brian was saying, you did pretty good. But I wasn't going to tell him first.
You were worried that Musioki, but you were worried he was going to catch you.
Oh, yeah.
He had caught you before.
Oh, yeah.
Did all three of you break the world record?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So all three of you had a time to break.
Yes.
That's just amazing to me.
Yeah, because the record at the time, I want to say, I think I was 30 seconds faster than the previous world record.
Wow.
And so I was 1 hour, 55 seconds. I think Nick Rose was about 8 or 9 seconds behind Musioki, something like that. So it was close.
You said you struggled early. When did it dawn on you to think, okay, I can take this. I can win this race? Because I don't think you're thinking world record. You're thinking win the race.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Place high and win the race. I think when I pushed through that point, and sometimes in running, if you push through a point, you kind of have a breakthrough and it's easier. I know some might call it the runner's high. I never thought of it as a runner's high, but I did break through that point where it became easier at that point. And then I was running freely at that point. We crossed a bridge and came back where we'd come from. Any move that was made, I was able to cover it. And then I would pick up and push the pace a little bit. And then, of course, the last mile where I was able to push it and end up winning it.
Were you trying to push to make sure he didn't have the kick to get you?
Absolutely.
You were trying to push him to.
And I was more worried about Nick Rose, who was sub 4 minute miler and Olympian for Great Britain. So I was most worried about him.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't.
And I knew Musioki would be right there, but I was most worried about the speed of Rose. Because if Nick Rose would have been within a second or two of me, he'd have kicked me down easily. But I got a gap of, 9 seconds on him. And if you get that kind of a gap and you're that close to end, it's hard to motivate yourself to push through it. And so I knew that my best chance of winning is I had to get away. And so that's what I tried to do and gapped them both. It was an exciting time afterwards. And then they had the awards at the race director's house later that afternoon. So it was a fun time.
So going into that, you had no idea what might be ahead and what could be.
Well, especially the way that week had gone, where I didn't feel great in the middle of the week. And I knew I was in good shape, and I knew I was in shape to run fast, but I really wasn't thinking about world record at the time. I was just thinking about running fast and winning.
What did you think when you saw that it was the world record? And you knew it. You knew it.
Well, I knew going into it, that last mile, I knew we were under it at that point. So I had my watch on, so I looked at each mile, and I could tell what each mile was. And so it ended up averaging just under 4:39 a mile for the 13.1. The last mile was the fastest one, and it was right at 4:32. It was my last mile. So I went from, 4:42, the 12th mile uphill, to 4:32, the last mile. Obviously excitement, but it's once you do something like that, it's right afterwards, kind of that big elation part subsides. It was still exciting. And then the notoriety that comes along with that is fun as well. But then it was back to work. You got to keep going,
I remember getting a call from you.
Mm-hmm. Now, tell me, I don't remember what I said.
I think you told me I broke the world record, and I think there was a pause where I was like,
what?
Yeah, I think what? And I remember getting off of the phone, and my roommates at the time, I was in St. Joseph at the time, and one of my roommates says, Brent, do you understand what that is? And, I'm just kind of, my head swirling. Said, no one has run that race faster ever, ever. And it stood for a good long while.
A little over, I guess it was 5 years later where Dionisio Cerrone broke the world record at Philly.
Oh, he did.
And he broke it, it's like 5 or 6 seconds, something like that.
And then 20 plus years before the American.
Yeah, 21 and a half years or something like that, where Ryan Hall went to Houston, Tenneco half marathon, and he broke it by over a minute. We communicated through text.
Well, you gave him a correct congratulations.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It was about time somebody broke it after that many years. It needed to be broken. But,
I remember your senior year at Central Missouri outdoor conference championships at Lincoln University in Jeff City.
Yeah.
Your 5 and 10 stood as a conference record. Has it been broken?
Oh, I'm sure it has since then. There have been...
it stood for 30 years or something.
Long time, but...
Yeah, 30 years is long.
Yeah, but there were Africans and one of the runners from Russia that end up running some faster times than me. But, again, the guys that were doing that were, because when I set that was, 22 years old. And these guys were 4 and 6 years older. So if I would have run there when I was 4 or 6 years older, I would run a lot faster.
Well, now I was telling Jeff, you got to a point where I couldn't see your races anymore because I couldn't afford to fly everywhere. I mean, you used to, Hospital Hill in Kansas City and things like that I would go see. But I remember that outdoor championship. And I know this is kind of going back a little ways, but that to me was one of the 10,000 was one of the most amazing races I ever saw you race. And the reason is you were so far ahead of everybody. You were pushing yourself.
Yeah.
There was nobody there. And we're talking about competition and like winning the half marathon and then breaking the record. You broke the record because of those two pushing. I mean, you guys are pushing each other, but you were out there on your own in the MIAA championship. I remember, I think it was Dennis Slusher, Chris Schaefer, and I were all watching and just amazed.
That was a good day. That was my best time in college, was at the championship.
You just pushed yourself.
Yeah. I remember coming around, there might have been 2 or 3 that I didn't lap in that race, but I came around and lapped my future brother-in-law, Brian Frankie. And so I ran with him for part of a lap. He says, keep going. Yeah. And he said, keep going.
Because he wanted to see how fast you could run it.
So I slowed down for at least a half a lap.
That's something where the motivation inside, that competitive spirit, people mistake that and they don't understand how competitive you are. I think sometimes people underestimate you, the competitive fire you have. You're not demonstrative. You're quiet. You're self-effacing. You're humble. You're very humble. But that competitive fire is there.
Oh, absolutely.
And that drives you. And people mistake Mark Curp if they don't understand that competitiveness. It's just you want to be the very best you can be.
Mm-hmm. I think I approached any race I ran, and even races against guys that had times faster than me. I rarely ever went into a race thinking, I can't win this race. I went into it, it's like, hey, I'm going to run as fast as I can, as long as I can, and see how many guys I can beat and have fun. And I always kind of took it, if I didn't win, is like, how did I run as a whole? Did I keep improving? And there were a number of races that were disappointing where I went one year, 87, I took second place in 8 races. I didn't win a single major race. I took second place in 8 races, none of them by the same guy. And I got beat numerous times by 1, 2, 3 seconds. So break it down to a pack of runners down to 2 people. And then I would just get out kicked a little bit. And I would still run faster the last mile, but just a little bit shorter. And so that was my biggest challenge, one of my biggest challenges in races, where I could have gone to a step higher if I could have sprinted faster at the end.
Now, that year that you're talking about, though, you were named top road racer of the year by Runner's World.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because of that consistency.
Right.
And I was thinking about a sports comparison, and it was from a decade earlier, but Jack Nicklaus had a lot of second places.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, what did it take to beat Jack? That took Tom Watson at his very best to beat Jack Nicklaus. So it seemed like your strategy to push the pace, to not bring it down to that last kick, would knock out most of the competition.
Yeah.
But there might be one guy that was feeling like you did in Philadelphia that day.
Yeah.
You ran into that a lot.
Yeah, I did. And even the year that I won Philly, I think I won Falmouth, I won Philly, I won Bix. There were 3 or 4 big races I won, and then I took second in another 5. So there were just a few that I had breakouts and won them.
So you alluded to this. After you break the world record, it's kind of like get back to work. And
yeah.
It's like you enjoy it, but there's more opportunities you're going to have because you broke a world record.
Well, you can't set on your laurels and just, expect that to get you there. And plus, at the time, as a professional athlete, part of my income was from a stipend from New Balance Shoe Company. But more of it in those better years was from appearance money and from prize money. You may have great times, but if you go to a race and you don't perform well, you don't get paid.
Yeah.
And I remember one race in Indianapolis. I went out, and a pack of 5 of us, and all 5 of us went under the world record in that race. I was 5th in that, and I got a side stitch like a mile from the finish, and I thought I was going to drop out, but I ended up taking 5th, and I was under the old world record. You know what I got?
Nothing.
I didn't get $1 other than I got a good time. And in running, there wasn't a ton of prize money at that time. There were more races with prize money, but it wasn't huge dollars. So you really had to, in order to make a decent living out of it, you had to place in the top 3 consistently. And I was able to do that for a number of years, to place in the top 3 consistently.
I think that's the other thing about you. Not only did you have a world record in 1985 and you were the top road racer in 87 and 88, you continued to run competitively and set records all the way to the end of the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you had a long career.
Yeah.
And it wasn't
15 years.
It wasn't just you're showing up because you had a good name and do a clinic and that was that. You were there competing and setting records. Into
my 30s. Yeah. 30s and beyond. And then even when I started working for American Century Investments in 97, I was still running, not at the same level, but I was still running and competing more locally, regionally.
One thing I did want to make sure we covered, you never made it to the Olympics,
Right.
which I think disappointed you.
Sure.
But again, the Olympics didn't have your race.
Right.
But you did run for the USA.
Yeah.
There a couple times.
Mm-hmm. I ran, there was a track meet in L.A. It was with East Germany in the U.S. I ran there. I got to run in the Coliseum where the Olympics would be later on. And then I represented the U.S. in the Pan Am Games down in Cuba at a time when not many Americans got to go to Cuba. So I got to go to Havana, and all the soldiers are out there with their guns and stuff when we got off of the charter plane.
Well, you fought through injuries and you fought through illness. And I remember reading in 93, I believe it was, you went out to Utah, got invited to kind of reacquaint yourself with highest level running and just focus entirely on that.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting because it kind of echoed your experience as a freshman at CMSU.
Yeah.
You were lagging.
Yeah.
And then as the weeks went along, you were right there.
Well, I was going through a marriage breakup at the time, went through a separation and lost a lot of weight. I was struggling in the half marathon in West Virginia, Charleston, West Virginia, and didn't run horrible, but didn't run well compared to what I should have. And so I got an opportunity to go out and run with three of my friends out in Utah. So I got in my S10 pickup and drove out there and had a mattress in the back of it, laid down in Wyoming, partway out there and napped for a little bit and then went on.
This is what a world record holder runner does.
Dedication.
And then I went out and ran with for 6 weeks with Paul Pilkington and Ed Eyestone and Paul Cummings, and got to train with them, and it was a great experience. I had never trained with athletes of that caliber. I'd race against them on a regular basis, but I didn't train with them on a day-to-day basis.
These are all world class.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely at top of their game runners.
Ed Eyestone and Paul Cummings were both Olympians, and then Paul Pilkington was a very good runner too. Went out there and trained, and it was for the Twin Cities Marathon. So I ended up taking, third or fourth at Twin Cities, but I had a PR, and it's still my best time in the marathon. And I ended up averaging faster per mile in the marathon than I did the half marathon 7 weeks prior. So it did make a difference, and was able to get the focus back and kind of get away from the stress for that short period of time.
You did win your first marathon in 95.
Yes, at Grandma's.
At Grandma's.
Yeah. I did. That was later in my career, obviously.
Now, that's not at his grandma's.
It's a weird name for a marathon.
It is. Yeah, there's a restaurant there, Grandma's.
I presumed something like that.
But yeah, I did win that one. So
running from Two Harbors to Duluth, and I've been in both places. And they're not close. They're 26 miles apart.
That's right. It is point to point.
26.2.
Yeah, it is point to point.
But you're not a marathon fan, are you?
No, I love to run. And I wished I could now, but since my last bout of cancer, the neuropathy in my feet, it's no longer fun to do it just because it's not comfortable. It's better than it was, but not comfortable. But the marathon would take so much out of you that the recovery time, if you wanted to not be injured, you had to take time off. And at least that was my experience. You had to take time off, and it just the recovery was challenging. So Grandma's, though, was one where the way I ran it, I didn't go out as hard, and then was able to pick it up faster in the midpoint, actually 17 miles into the race. And so I finished that one. I wasn't even tired.
As we kind of get to the closeout part, I want you to talk about the relationships. You've kind of hinted at that, the relationships with people, and I'm going to point out 2 or 3 names. Ed Eyestone, that you already mentioned, Charlie Gray, and your sister.
Yeah, Darla.
Your sister was a fabulous runner in her own right, and occasionally you ran in the same events. And
here in the Kansas City area.
Teamed up, and how fun was that? What was that relationship like?
Oh, yeah, it was great. Darla was excellent female runner. We didn't get to train a lot together, but we did run together. I would slow down just a little bit, and then she would run a little harder. That was fun to have that time period to run with her, and would have liked for it to have been longer, but then she went on to have kids sooner, and and then her running slowed down a little bit.
She won a national championship.
She did. She did more than I did.
Yeah.
I never won a national championship.
Because that's kind of a trivia question at Central Missouri. A Curp won a national championship, but it
actually
was not marked.
She did win a national championship, and I took second and third, but I never won. In fact, I took second twice.
Talk about Charlie Gray, because the sports scene in Kansas City kind of honored running. Hospital Hill was a big thing, and there were other events, and it seemed like that community, and of course you were talking about the Warrensburg guys that ended up over here in Lee Summit. You kind of had a lifelong running relationship there. Talk about that
Charlie and I have a long relationship, and now, of course, he lives in Colorado and has for a number of years. I always enjoyed the opportunity. I guess when I first started running with him was when he came down to Warrensburg as a grad assistant and helped out with coaching so he's 4 or 5 years older than me. And I couldn't stay with him, my junior year in college. My senior year, I was right with him. And then once I graduated from college, it's when my times got faster than Charlie. But Charlie was always competitive. Didn't matter what. And he always pushed the pace, and even in workouts. And so that pushed me more than if I was running by myself. And we got to run together on a regular basis. And doing anything sports related or really anything in life, there's more fun if you can share it with somebody else. And especially if you're on similar levels to do that. So we got to experience a lot of that, running in races together. And obviously the ones you mentioned earlier where we tied at the end of 2. To show you Charlie's competitiveness in workouts, if it was a hard run, I could usually stay ahead of him. But I think there are a couple different instances, and he would share them if he was here, or just running not far from here, just out in the country here at the time. And I was struggling a little bit on a run, and he sensed that. And so he pushed it. And so he finished that workout ahead of me. And I told him, good job.
Well, there was an article where he's quoted a lot, and he said that he measured himself by you. He wanted to know how far behind you he was in a race, and you probably wanted to know how far ahead of him you were.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the inner game.
Yeah.
How
close we were to each other.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of fun, and still is, because since then he doesn't race as much. He does run some, but he's had a hip surgery and all. But he and his wife do lots of hiking out in Colorado. There have been a couple times that I've traveled out to Colorado, and we've got to go on a 14er hiking together. So I've done that a couple times. That was fun years after he had moved out there.
How do you sum this up? Brent, how would you sum this story up?
One of the things that amazed me about Mark is, I knew he was a great runner in small schools in high school. I had no idea, and we started rooming together.
Freshman year.
Yeah, it was freshman year. Always knew Mark Curp as Mark Curp.
Mm-hmm.
I never knew Mark Curp as Mark Curp the runner. Later, he's my best friend.
You knew more of me just as friends.
We were friends.
And prior to all the running. Yeah.
But I was amazed to watch him just get better and better. And I think that attributes of anything else. It's the competitiveness and the drive. It's a wanting to make the most out of who you are and what you were. But from Mark, I saw him improve. And then all of a sudden it kind of dawned on me that he's really good and he's getting better. And then, like I said, we would, Hospital Hill, things in this area, and I get to watch him. And then all of a sudden it's like, he's gone beyond me. I can't keep up with him because I can't fly out all these places to watch him race, and he has to call me and tell me how it went. It wasn't very good coverage of it. And I really was kind of amazed as my good friend just kept getting better and better. And then when he broke the world record, and I just kind of sat back. I remember that evening just thinking, wow.
It's just,
I
can't even imagine it when you're a kid living in these small towns. You can't imagine that. It's just beyond your dreams.
But I will say this too. He's still the same guy he was.
Yeah.
When it was just us trying to figure out what in the world we're doing at Central Missouri and not even knowing whether we're going to make it or not. There's no change.
Yeah.
He's still Mark.
Yep.
There's something about rural life. There's something about farm life.
Mm-hmm.
When we do the podcast, I've talked to some people that have gone to some pretty heady places. They're just so-and-so from this little small town, you know, and people take great pride in them from those towns. And you recognize that.
Yeah.
You know that you have to live up to that. You're the most famous athlete to ever come from Polo, Missouri. You're the most famous runner to ever come from the state of Missouri in distance running. You're carrying that banner for a lot of people that have hope in you and the hopes you had for yourself.
I think for Mark, it was discipline, competitive. This is what I do. And for a while, that's what you did for your living. That was your living.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability.
How about you? I mean, when you look back on this career, it was a blessing. There were a lot of trials and tribulations. There were great moments. What stands out to you?
A lot of things stand out, but I think never giving up, for one thing. because everybody's going to face struggles in life, but never giving up, never quitting, and believing you can get better. And my faith would be the number one thing. I would say without my faith in the Lord, I would not have accomplished the things I did, and I would have been a different person with the things that I might have accomplished without that. The relationships I've had that have grown stronger, and just a broad range of experiences that I've had over, now my 66 years, coming up on 67, and we're just a month apart. Yep. I think you're a month older, right?
I'm a week or two older. That's about it.
I am younger.
Yeah. Yes, you are, young man.
Still maturing.
Yeah.
I think that road's running out.
Well, this has been great. And Mark, I want to thank you for giving us a glimpse into your life of running at the highest level over your long career in road racing. And you've always been a great role model, an example of what work, commitment, perseverance can bring you to develop that God-given ability, and your acknowledgement of that. Mm-hmm. You're the best distance runner in Missouri history by far. And I want to thank you for letting Show Me Sports Legacies bring your story to some people that maybe haven't heard it.
Thank you.
Hopefully it'll be something that a parent or a kid will hear and strike a spark for them as they pursue the enjoyment, as you've always pointed out, the enjoyment and the fun of sports, because you burn out without that.
Yeah. So many kids I see in sports today that, unfortunately, so many of them, I think parents are trying to live their dreams through their kids and pushing them beyond. Instead, it needs to be fun. I mean, there's plenty of times in life to get serious on stuff, but I think if kids had more fun, and it'd be more like holding them back than pushing them forward. But that's the part of being burnt out. If you take some of the greatest athletes, they love to do it. And in my running, I would have run even if I wouldn't have gotten paid for it. Getting paid made it easier to do because I didn't have to hold another full-time job down for many years. Whatever you do in life, if you would do it because you love to do it versus whether you get paid or not.
Good words. Thank you, and I really enjoyed being here with you today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Well, there you have it. Some old friends getting together and talking about the world record-breaking career of one Mark Curp from Polo, Missouri. The thing that I would say at the end, we talked about the relationships in the running community, his faith, and just the love of running. It seems real simple with Mark. It was a way to express his faith. It was the fact that he loved it and enjoyed it. And it was the relationships and the respect he had for his fellow competitors and the kind of family feeling among the running community.
Yeah, and if you need any motivation, this story and Mark's story, like others, will help you push through. I think after listening to that, I think I want to go get my tennis shoes on and lace them up and go out for a run. That's what sports are all about, motivation and sacrifice, and hearing these stories. And maybe that can motivate some listeners out there or some other people to get out and do the thing that you love to do.
Happy to present this story to you and the many more that we have planned. Thank our listeners at Show Me Sports Legacies.